Konnichiwa. Today we're going to talk about some of the mysteries of the word koto, and this can indeed be very mysterious to foreign learners because some meanings really can't be translated into English or other languages. We can understand them, but we have to understand them as Japanese concepts. One example is when we encounter expressions like anata no koto ga suki da. Now, I think we all know what this means in phrasebook terms. It means, more or less, I love you. It's not, in fact, how we would say the exact phrase, I love you, in Japanese, which would be aishiteru. And that's an expression that, while it technically means I love you, almost nobody ever uses in Japanese. Anata no koto ga suki da is fairly understandable if it were just anata ga suki da, I like you. But actually what we're saying is that I like your koto. Now what does that really mean? Probably the best way to translate it is to say, I like things about you, or I like the thing about you. In practice it implies that I like things like your laugh, the twinkle in your eyes, the way you walk, the way you drink your coffee, your funny little blue hat. And the implication is that you've become familiar by observation or proximity with various things about the person, and that this has gradually accumulated into feelings of love. Now you can't say that in English without writing a little essay or a song to somebody, but in Japanese it's all encapsulated in that koto. So what we could say is that koto is very, very agile, more agile than most agile words in Japanese, and the concept of linguistic agility is very, very important and completely neglected in most language teaching. What we can say in an agile way isn't just a matter of convenience, it deeply affects how we express ourselves and what we're likely to actually say. Things that can be said in an agile way in a particular language are the things we're most likely to actually express and express regularly. Conversely, the things that a culture particularly wishes to express are the things that become agile in a language. So, if you want to learn more about agility, please watch my video on the subject. The use of koto here is less direct, as textbooks sometimes say. It's not just a question of being less direct. It avoids any sense of direct physicality, and it tends to give this whole implication of the gradual blossoming of love through the understanding of things about a person. This is something that Japanese wants to express commonly enough that it has made it a very agile thing to express. Now, similarly, we may say things like, watashi no koto ga kirai rashi. That person or those people appear to find my koto dislikable. Why would we say that? Well, a lot of the reason, I think, is connected with the way of thinking. That also means that we can't directly express someone else's emotions, which of course is an actual fact that European languages tend to overlook, the fact that we never actually do know someone else's feelings or emotions. Similarly, no one actually knows anybody else directly. We can't really know another person. We can't know the depths of their being. I'm sure many people watching this assume that I'm a human being pretending to be an android. This is how little we can know about any other being. So when we're talking about something deeper that affects our emotions, rather than simple acquaintance with a person, it really makes no sense talking about them being reactions to us. They're not reactions to us. They're not reactions to our actual being. They're reactions to what they have observed about our conduct, our appearance, our words. And that, our koto, is what they may either like or dislike. Now, when there isn't a cultural factor, koto can, in some circumstances, be much easier to translate and understand. So, for example, if we say Tanaka-san no koto, and we don't have any particular affection for Tanaka-san, this translates most of the time fairly easily into things like the matter of Tanaka-san, the affair concerning Tanaka-san, or just the fact that Tanaka-san is a bit of an awkward person to deal with. What we actually mean by Tanaka-san no koto will depend on what the hearer knows about the history of ourselves and Mr. Tanaka. So this really isn't very difficult at all. But a lot of people have asked me to explain expressions like doyu koto and soyu koto. And I've touched on these before, so I'll just go over this a little. Yu and koto, in a way, belong together, because a koto is a situation, a circumstance, by implication, something that actually requires a bit of explanation. And the idea of explanation, the idea of expression, and the idea of a koto, I think have always been very close in Japanese. That's why the kun reading of the kanji that we use in yu, the other kun reading, the one when it's a noun, is koto. It's not the same koto, but as we know, if we know much about Japanese and kanji, there are often alternative kanji for the same word. Now these aren't quite the same word, but they are related. And this is why we're always getting expressions like soyu koto, doyu koto, toyu koto, because a koto is something said, something explained, a situation that requires words. So the question doyu koto is one that we often hear. It means, in a way, what kind of koto? And what kind of, we're taught in Genki and other textbooks, is donna in Japanese, and indeed it is. But we tend to use doyu more often in cases where either more explanation might be required, or where the explanation would be perhaps a little less expected. So, for example, when a character finds herself in a strange situation, or simply doesn't know what's going on, because it's all very strange and unexpected, she's very likely to say, doyu koto? What kind of a thing is this? In what way explained a situation is taking place or has taken place here? Similarly, when Catriel Layton solves a case, she says, soyu koto deshita. So that's how the situation was explained, and it's thrown into the past tense because the idea is that she has solved a mystery that is a standing mystery. In other words, this was the explanation all along, and she's just discovered it. Now, soyu koto or doyu koto doesn't have to be something particularly recondite or difficult, but it tends to imply a greater depth of needed explanation than a simple donna. On the other hand, we do also have donna's partner, sonna, frequently used with koto, and in these cases, the implication is often that while the koto is relatively easily understood or explained, we have some kind of a negative reaction to it. Now that could be denial, or it could be protest or disappointment. So, for example, if somebody praises us, you may say, sonna koto ga nai. That's not true, because in Japanese it's polite to reject praise. And this is so frequent that it's often reduced simply to sonna koto, or even just sonna. So we're saying that what you've said, this situation that you're describing about me, is not the case. I'm not worthy of this praise. And we'll also often hear characters or people saying simply sonna koto, or just sonna. And the implication of this is that what is happening is very unsatisfactory, or that what someone has said was a bad or unkind thing to say. So, sonna koto, or more often, sonna, represents a negative reaction to the situation, And it's interesting in that clearly it's an unfinished sentence. You're going to say something about the sonna koto. But unlike many Japanese unfinished sentences, this one, this sonna of protest, is so lodged into the language that it's actually difficult to finish the sentence. It's actually difficult to say what the person might have said if they had finished the sentence, because it's almost never finished. Sonna has evolved into a protest against the dreadfulness of something all by itself. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below, and I will answer as usual. I'd like to thank my Gold Kokeshi patrons, my producer angels, who make these videos possible, and all my patrons and supporters on Patreon and everywhere. And I'd like to thank you for attending this lesson. これからもよろしくお願いします。Class dismissed.